Good to go?
Yeah.
Blind whiskey tastings are a really fun way to explore new whiskey. But what if the person who put together the selection isn't a whiskey drinker? So Jess put together a lineup of 6 whiskies that aren't part of my usual collection to see if I can figure out what they are on a blind tasting. Hey guys, I'm Nath Martin, the Whiskey Scribe. I'm a whiskey enthusiast and I love all things whiskey. Now, taste is subjective and there's a lot of whiskies out there and a lot of different ways to enjoy them. So whether you're a whiskey connoisseur or you're just looking to learn a little bit more about whiskey, let's explore it all together. If you'd like to see more from me, please consider subscribing. I put up new videos every week. You can also follow me over on Instagram. So a blind whiskey tasting is where you're getting a selection of whiskies, but you've got no idea what they are. You haven't seen the bottle, you don't know what distillery they're from, what they're aged in, and it's up to you as the whiskey drinker to taste them and see if you can work out what the alcohol volume is, what casks they've been aged in, how old the whiskey might be, perhaps even what region they're from, and if you're really good, what distillery they're from. Now, because Jess isn't a regular whiskey drinker, I've got no idea what this selection is. She doesn't have any preferences that are going to give me any hints. I've sort of given her free rein, and she hopped onto the website Horny Pony. And that's a great site where you've got the opportunity to buy whiskies by 15, 30 and 50 ml bottles. So if you ever want to try something and you're not sure you want to invest in a whole bottle, you can hop online, go to Horny Pony, and just pick out whatever selection you want. So with this lineup, Jess has said that there's not really a particular theme, so everything's going to be probably a little bit different. To test my skills, I'm going to see if I can work out approximately what the alcohol volume is, what casks the whiskey had been aged in, how old the whiskey might be within a few years, what region it might be from, as well as, if I'm really on the money, trying to work out what distillery it's from.
Yeah, if I'm being honest, I don't think you're going to be able to guess any of them. And full disclosure, when I picked the whiskies, I just picked what I thought looked cool.
Just gonna pick the ones I think will be cool.
I'm excited. Let's get started. So starting with whiskey number 1. So what we've done here, while I was off hiding in another room, Jess has poured all of these whiskies and we popped lids on them. These sort of try to keep most of the aromas there within the glass. You'll see the glass is fogged up a little bit. And that's just because we've got the air conditioning on, the glass is a little bit cooler, there's a bit of vapors in there. That's fine, it doesn't affect the whiskey. It's just because there's a lid, those alcohol vapors don't have anywhere to go. So if I'm looking at this, it's got a bit of a dark color. If it hasn't had any artificial color, I'm going to say that this has been aged probably in sherry casks. On the nose, I'm sort of getting like a little bit of a musty sweetness. That's really unusual. There's almost like a soft cheese smell in the background. It's definitely on the musty side of things. Like that sweetness, it's kind of like potpourri if it's gotten a little bit moist. Just sounds horrible. That doesn't mean I think it smells bad. I like that, and I still stand by what I said before. I do think this has been aged in sherry casks, at least for a little bit. I'm getting some really strong wood notes, so I think it's probably spent some time in bourbon casks as well, because I can taste the wood in there. Okay, I'm going to guess, when it comes to the alcohol volume, I'm thinking this is sort of around about 46%, because there's a little bit of a burn there on the throat. It's not too strong, but it's enough. Like I said, that color, unless they've added caramel, judging by the sweetness, I would say it's spent some time in sherry casks. In terms of region, I would probably guess this is either a Highland or possibly one of the islands. It's not salty enough to be Talisker.
I don't know if I should tell you a clue about like geography. It's international.
So it's not necessarily Scottish.
Correct. There are Scottish ones in there.
Okay.
There is...
Ooh, plot twist. Okay, so some of these are Scottish, but they're not necessarily all Scottish.
Correct.
So in terms of the region, I'm not just trying to decide between 5 or 6 They say there's 5 Scottish whiskey regions, but some people say there's 6. You've got the Highlands, Speyside, Lowlands, Campbelltown and Islay. And then technically a lot of the other islands on the west coast, they're classed as part of Highlands, but a lot of people refer to them as individual islands. So that's the regions I was thinking I was going to have to pick these from.
No, I thought that would have been too easy if I just did Scotland. So I went...
Yeah, you're right. That would have been easier.
I went international.
Okay, so it's gone international. In that case, this could be an Australian whiskey.
Why do you say that?
Because I'm now second guessing and I'm thinking this is probably actually red wine casks. I'm not getting the typical sweetness that I get from a sherry cask, but judging by that colour, it's definitely been in something that's held a red grape. I am now thinking that this is probably, I think this is possibly an Australian whiskey that's been aged in red wine casks. Not sure which ones, but that's what I'm going with.
Lock it in, maybe?
Yeah, we'll lock it in.
Okay.
Right, whiskey number 2. Okay, so this one, very similar colour to the last one. You might notice it's got sort of like a copper sort of colour to it. On the nose.
Yeah.
Other than that chocolate and a little bit of vanilla, I'm not... It's a nice nose, but I'm not getting a lot of other notes there. I'm going to have to go in for the taste.
Three hours later.
So I'm getting more vanilla. I'm getting a little bit of toffee. Yeah, I'm getting more earthy flavours. Not so much woody, but almost sort of more like leather. Almost burnt toffee, leather, a little bit of dark chocolate. Is this potentially an international or is it a Scottish?
It's international.
It is international?
Yes, it is a place that you would not necessarily associate with making whiskey because of its climate.
So it's a hotter country. So it's potentially an Indian whiskey.
I'm not going to tell you the answer.
Thank you. You're not going to tell me again. I was probing. So this is a bit of a puzzler. It's not familiar to me. Yeah, I definitely don't think I've had this before. Jess is hinting that it's international and from a country that you probably wouldn't think has whiskey. I think it's a relatively low ABV. I'm going to say somewhere between 40 and 43%. I don't think it's exceptionally old. It doesn't taste like it's too young. So I think it's been aged in a hot climate where that aging process seems to happen a little bit quicker. It's young, but I'm not thinking that because it tastes undeveloped. It's nicely balanced, but I don't think it's anything older than 5 years. I would say more likely 3 to 5 years in a hot country where that aging process is sort of sped up.
I think you're only guessing a hot country because I told you about the maturation and you wouldn't have guessed that if I hadn't said it.
Oh yeah, no, that's totally, that's the hint. Otherwise I would have been just trying to think of, I don't know where I would put this in Scotland. Now, whiskey number 3. Now, unfortunately I didn't polish this glass very well, which is why when it frosted up it looked a little bit dirty. Not important. So if I'm looking at this one, it's a little bit lighter than the other two. This sort of like a golden colour. So I don't know what it might be aged in at this stage. Oh.
What does that mean?
Instantly on the nose, I'm sort of getting, it's not exceptionally strong, but I'm getting a little bit of those, I'm not getting peat, but I'm getting that iodine smell you get from peat when it's from Islay. It smells almost meaty, like a cured meat. And there's some sort of, there's some stone fruits in there as well. Sort of like rock melon, cantaloupe. That's really interesting. That's a bit of a curveball. It's another international.
Yes, but...
But by international, do you mean just not Scotland?
It's not Scotland.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to go in for a taste. That is peat. There's definitely peat in there. Those stone fruits, the rock melon sort of flavours, they've carried across, but they've sort of got a little bit of like a burnt sugar sort of taste to them now. That peat is there and it's It's nowhere near as strong as you would get from an Islay whiskey, but it's definitely that iodine sort of flavour you get from an Islay whiskey. I'd be inclined to, if this was an Islay whiskey, I would say that this is a bourbon cask because there's not a lot of colour there. It's sort of like a little bit of honey that carries across, but there's not, it might have a sherry finish, but I'd almost be more inclined to say, I was about to say this might be aged in an Islay cask. I'm thinking this might be Penderyn, a Welsh whiskey, aged in Lafroig casks. If I'm going to be really bold on that guess. I'm also going to say that the ABV is relatively low. I think it's probably around about 43%, maybe a little bit either side. If I have to hazard a guess, knowing that it's not Scotland, I would probably say Welsh whiskey Penderyn aged in Lafroig casks.
That's your guess? That's
my guess.
Locking it in?
Yeah, I'm locking it in.
Are you sure?
I honestly, if I got told that that was wrong and I had to pick something else, I don't know which way I would go from here.
All right.
We're halfway through. I'd like to state for the record that even though the box of these sample whiskies have been sitting on the dining room table for a week, I have not opened the box to double check them. I have not even looked at the Horny Pony whiskey website to see what they have on offer to see if that would help me out. I've tried to come in this completely blind. And it's working so far on the first three. I am blind. Whiskey number 4. There is not much colour in there at all. Look at that. It's virtually no colour.
But I will say that I picked this whiskey based on its name.
Based on its name?
Not the distillery name, the
name of the
this whiskey.
Okay.
And I have no idea if it has any bearing on the flavour whatsoever. But judging by your face, maybe it does.
I'm getting a combination of cut grass and something ashy. So when I first put my nose to this, I thought I did instantly go Islay. I realised I'm probably just hoping for an Islay whiskey because that'd really help me narrow things down. I can't put my finger on it. It's a smoke. If you smelt this sort of smoke in a room, you would be standing there in the middle of the room trying to work out what it's from before you would run out of the building. Because I know I've smelt this before, but judging by the clear colour too, it's possibly quite young. Maybe only in virgin oak casks. Anyway.
A few moments later. 1 hour later.
That is so wonderfully oily and smoky. That is 100% an Islay whiskey. I'd be very surprised if that wasn't Lafroig or Lagavulin. Maybe, no, it might be Ardbeg. In terms of ABV, I'm going to say it's sort of in the high 40s. I'd say either second fill bourbon casks, which is why there's not much colour, or possibly even virgin oak. Again, I think it's a non-age statement. I don't think this has been aged for an exceptionally long time. It may be about 5 years old, but I'll be very surprised if this wasn't from Islay. I'm going to say that's either an Ardbeg or a Lafroig. All right, renewed interest from whiskey 4, so now I'm on to whiskey 5. Okay, so we're back to a slightly darker colour again. You can see this has sort of got, it's more golden, maybe a little bit of copper. In terms of the legs, oh, I think that's a very oily whiskey. That's quite slow moving. That has a really interesting nose. That sort of has the smell of almost decaying plant matter.
Are you getting more drunk?
No, there's this sweetness in there, sort of a little bit of honey in the background. Yeah, it's almost like the smell of a wet log rotting in the forest. I feel weird saying that.
You should.
Look, the nose is just confusing me more than anything else. I'm going to go in for a taste. Okay, I'm not 100% certain on the cask. I think it's probably a sherry cask with a little bit of time in, or more time in bourbon. But that odd smell that I couldn't quite place, that's just another form of peat. Judging by how more earthy and sort of caramelly this is, because I'm getting caramel. I'm getting competitive. I'm getting some caramel and I'm getting that smoky peatness, but it's not over the top. And that's why I'm thinking that this is a Bowmore. I really do think that this is an Islay whiskey. It's a Bowmore peated. I'd say probably around about the 46% mark. I think this has been aged a little bit longer. I think this might be more somewhere between 8 and 12 years. I would be quite surprised if that wasn't a Bowmore whiskey. Last whiskey, whiskey number 6. It's another light coloured whiskey. So you can see it's quite clear. So I dare say there's no special cask in there. It'd probably be first or second fill bourbon cask, just at a glance before tasting. Oh. So I think I'm getting a little bit of smoke. I am getting some chocolate notes, and that chocolate, each time I sniff it, it differs between white chocolate or milk chocolate, but there's some sort of sharp smokiness in the background and some sort of fruity flavour. I think it might be stone fruit. No, it's more like crisp apple. That's really interesting. I'm gonna have to try it. That's sweeter than I was expecting. That crisp apple smell on the nose, that's come through, and I've actually got, like, it's a green apple flavour. The smoke is actually softer on the palate than it is on the nose. If it is peated, I think it's peated, but I actually think the ABV of this one is over 50%.
Not Scottish.
Not Scottish?
No.
Okay.
But it is from a place that has meaning to us.
A place that has meaning to us. Is this a New Zealand whiskey? I know you're not going to tell me anything. I'm going to be really excited because I've never tasted a New Zealand whiskey before.
Really?
Really?
Interesting.
Never tasted a New Zealand whiskey. But that peat, that explains why that peat, it almost smells like Islay peat. It has like the faint saltiness, but it doesn't have the iodine. I don't think there's anywhere in Australia that makes a whiskey like this. Not that I've tried. Okay, so ABV, I'm thinking it's somewhere just north of 50%. I don't think it's more than 55. The barrel aging, I think that is more likely, yeah, that'd be either virgin oak or second fill bourbon cask, because I'm not getting heaps of vanilla. I'm getting that wonderful crisp apple, green apple sort of flavour. From what you said, I think New Zealand. In terms of age, probably only about 5 or 6 years, maybe less. I'd be very surprised if it was older than about 6 years. That is a nice whiskey. That's nicely balanced. That was fun. Sometimes when you're doing a blind tasting, a whiskey will really stand out. Number 5 stood out to me. I'm pretty sure it's Bowmore. We'll find out in a second. But normally in a blind tasting, there'll be at least 1 or 2 that is something you've had before. I don't think I've had any of these whiskies before, and I think there's only 1 or 2 where I've had something from the distillery. So it'll be really interesting to see how right I am. I don't think I'm going to be right on many distilleries, but I think I'm going to be a little bit accurate on the age and the barrels and maybe the ABV. But we'll find out in a second.
This is the first one. It is the...
I have not had anything from that distillery. So Transportation Tasmanian Single Pot Still Whiskey, limited pre-release, 51% ABV.
There's definitely a theme with your guesses in relation to the ABV. In that I think you have diluted your palate so much with whiskey drinking that everything tastes lower than it actually is.
I mean, that's a very smooth whiskey. That's really, look, that was a nice whiskey. And if that's a 51% ABV and I thought it was 46, that's a testament to how damn smooth that is.
So some interesting facts about this whiskey that I could find on the Horny Pony website is that it is made using traditional Irish
pot still
method. So I thought that was quite cool.
Okay. Do you know what it's been aged in?
Oh yes, so you actually had some pretty spot on guesses. This one was aged in Oloroso.
Oh, okay.
Bourbon and port.
Okay.
So you were kind of pretty close. Like you know, you were in the right area.
I'm not disappointed in myself. That's okay. That's fantastic because I've never actually tasted Transportation.
I also picked this whiskey because of the bottle that I saw on the website. It looks like a fish sauce bottle. I'll show you a picture later. So this whiskey was one that I don't think you've ever heard of before.
Wow.
So this one was the
Milk and Honey Apex Dead Sea Aged Israeli Single Malt Whiskey. And it's 56.2. Wow, you're right about my palate. Wow.
yeah.
Okay, now that I'm smelling, I think maybe it's potentially quite a strong whiskey. Okay.
The main feature of this whiskey is that it is made and matured at like the lowest,
The lowest altitude?
lowest altitude, yes. Distilled at sea level in Tel Aviv. Matured the lowest point on the planet, the Dead Sea, 427 meters below sea level.
Okay.
Temperature can also reach 50 degrees Celsius, so this is extreme maturation.
So that's very similar to India in that their temperature can reach 50 degrees and it may vary 20 degrees between night and day. Okay. I was right about the temperature in the
Yeah, but only because I told you that maturation was interesting. And we already know that maturation is interesting because if you're in a climate that's not like Scotland,
I said it was young.
it is young. It's a no-age statement as far as I can tell. Whiskey number 3. I'm actually really surprised that you didn't guess this one because I thought you'd had it before.
So I was completely wrong, wasn't I?
This country does try to emulate a lot of the Scottish whiskey practices.
I mean, most countries that make whiskey try to emulate a lot of the Scottish
Yeah,
practices.
I know, but anyways.
Oh, okay. Yoichi Grand Single Malt Japanese Whiskey, 48% ABV. So far, this is the closest in the ABV guesses that I've made. I'd be very surprised if this wasn't peated to some extent.
Yes, it is peated.
It is peated.
Yes.
Do we know where they get their peat from?
No, I couldn't see that.
Okay.
But it did say that it should have a heavily peated flavour and that it was in virgin oak.
Okay. I think I was right about that, wasn't I?
No, you said bourbon or sherry.
Okay. That is the first peated whiskey I've had from Japan.
Interesting.
And it is nice.
What number are we up to?
Number 4.
4. Yeah. Well.
I was really wrong, wasn't I? I was right about the region.
You were right about the region.
Yeah. Ah, okay, so that's why this was thrown off. So this is Colilla, 10-year-old, but it's a single malt, it's a Scotch Malt Whisky Society. Scotch Malt Whisky Society?
Yeah, I think so.
Scotch Malt Whisky Society bottling 53.266 salt and vinegar kelp. 60% ABV.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. I think you might be too drunk.
Colilla. I just haven't drunk a lot of it. Actually, you know what, in all fairness, I don't think I've ever had a Colilla that was cask strength. I'm making excuses. I messed up. I didn't know. It was a bad guess. You've done good so far in throwing me off as much as possible.
Look, I did want to make it needlessly difficult for you.
Okay, cool.
Because I'm super competitive, I'm going to try and make it as hard as possible for him. Whiskey number 5.
Yep.
Okay, so you guessed ABV 46%, region Isla. Cask, you said possibly sherry or bourbon, aged somewhere between 8 and 12 years old, and you were very adamant that it was Bowmore.
I'm still standing by that, and despite it being horribly wrong on the previous 4 whiskies.
This is the whiskey.
Oh! This is the Lagavulin 11-year-old Offerman Edition 3 Charred Oak Cask. I've been wanting to try this. Thank you.
I know you wanted to try this one.
Charred oak. Okay, that's why I thought it tasted earthy enough to be Bowmore.
So you got the region right.
That's really 11-year-old.
You were very close.
I was very close on the age. Charred oak. It doesn't say what type of oak though, does it?
No, it just said charred oak, I think.
I'm sure we can find that out, but that's beautiful. Please and thank you.
Okay, the last whiskey. I bought this one because I was only going to get 5, but this, let's be totally honest, this was the cheapest.
Really?
Like significantly cheap. I have no idea why it's cheap. But yeah, whiskey number 6 was kind of a wild card And I got it because I thought it was interesting to try something. I don't know if it's because it's a new distillery or if it's, yeah, I don't know, but.
Okay, so this is Thompson's South Island Peat New Zealand single malt whiskey. So this is my first New Zealand whiskey, and I'm very happy to have tried that.
Guess how much that one was for the 30 ml?
To be honest, I've never actually bought any of these off Horny Pony, so I don't know what their price ranges are.
Well, on average, the other 5 whiskies are somewhere between like $20 and $25.
Okay.
One of them might have been $28.
$15?
$8.50.
$8.50. What?
I don't know if that's a mistake or not.
That is a nice whiskey. If you like Isla whiskey and are happy with it being a little bit softer than a typical Isla whiskey, jump on a Horny Pony and buy yourself a bottle of Thompson's South Island Peat New Zealand single malt whiskey for $8.50.
Yeah, I'm going to check to see if it's still that much on their website. Yeah, it's still $8.50.
That's lovely. That was a really good lineup. That's fantastic. I feel like I learned a lot about the inefficiencies of my palate. But yeah, no, I got most of those wrong. That's fair. So that was the blind tasting. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. Next week, we're going to be doing an Irish whiskey tasting because it'll be posted a few days before St. Patrick's Day. Hopefully help you choose something for your Irish dram. But for now, enjoy what's in your glass and slange. New Zealand whiskey. How's that?
I wasn't paying attention.
Should we just assume that I did it?
No, can you do one more, please?
Okay.